Hi, in this part we are going to create the header section of our landing page. So let's get started by creating a new page and rename it landing page. Next, let's go to the frame tool and create one frame for our font size and a second one for our desktop size. Let's align those two frames. Select the two together and change its background style to dark background. Next, let's set our layout grid for my mobile screen and second for our desktop screen. That's great. Now let's go to assets and start by setting up our header. So let's start with the mobile navbar component. Let's click and drag to our mobile screen. Then go to constraint and hit left and right for the constraint. Also, let's do that for our desktop. All right, let's make sure it is centered and select left and right. Next, let's start by creating our headline text. So let's type in think better with reflect. Zoom in, center, and change its text style to H2, align horizontally, and make sure it is centered. And then let's hit Command C and Command V to duplicate and change its style to paragraph. Let's go to our plugins content reel and let's add a dummy text. Here, lorem ipsum short. Let's select line. Now let's click and drag to resize our paragraph. That's great. Next, let's change its color to muted text color, and for our headline, light text color. Select those together and let's set center horizontal constraints. All right. Next, let's add a button components. Let's click button, click, drag. Let's change our components preview. All right. Let's go to constraint of our button and set it to center. Next, let's add a mockup, which is a laptop mockup for our header. And let's go to plugins. And I believe our mockup plugin, it is called Mock Rocket. Hit run and let's select a MacBook Pro 16 with a black color. You can click and change the rotation. Right, that's great. Now let's add a placeholder image of a dummy screen that I have. Let's go to place image, Figma course, exercise file or image folder, and let's pick app screen.png, hit open and place it in my canvas. Let's make sure the image is selected and let's hit load selection. My image has been added. Next, let's export to Figma. All right, that's great. So let's resize my screen and move it to my mobile frame. First, let's adjust the height of my header, zoom in and resize to fit in the layout grid. Let's move that to the bottom to leave some room between my button and the other elements. That looks great. Now let's add my brands. I will add 5 brands logo in here in the bottom of my mockup. Let's go to place image and let's select those 5 brands, hit open and place one by one. Right, let's drag the first one here and the second one. So next, let's do third and the fourth logo. And the last one will be aligned to the center. Let's again adjust heads and maybe select my logo, click and resize, hold shift and resize. All right, make sure each logo has 2 columns. That looks great. Now maybe let's keep it, select all the logo and move down a bit to the bottom, and this must be aligned with this. This looks great. Now let's go to assets and let's add our background animation. Hold shift and resize, then move it to the frame. Let's go to layers and drag the background animation to the bottom so it will be in the background. Hold shift and resize to fit the frame width, and let's resize its head and move it to the top. Make sure it is aligned horizontally, and that's great. Next, let's group those brand, hit Command G, rename this to brand section or brands section, and select all the elements inside my header, and let's rename it header. Then go to frame, to group, and select frame, and here we'll tell him or tell our constraint to set left and right. So once we our frame, before that, let's change our mockup constraint to center, and again for my logos to center. So if I it's great. For my background, again to let's set it to left and right. Yeah, that looks great. Now let's do our desktop header. So let's copy all my basic elements, then select the desktop frame and hit Command V. Okay, now let's align each element to the right or to the left and align my headline and paragraph to the right. This will be H1. Let's move this down and resize it to fit 6 columns. And for the constraint, I will keep them to center and top. And for my mockup, let's move it to the right. Click, hold shift and drag. And I want its size to fit 6 column to the right. Looks great. All right, let's move this to the top. This will be aligned to the base of MacBook. All right. For my brand groups, let's move it here, and maybe let's first align them horizontally. All right. Now select one by one and hit tidy up and align vertically. Next, let's drag this right so each logo, so the last logo will be aligned to the right and the first one to the left column. I think this look great. And the last thing, let's add our background. Let's click and drag to the desktop frame and move it to the background. Okay, the back of my navbar. Let's resize it. Now let's have a full preview, and I think it's great. So let's resize my frame. All right, and the last thing, let's group all our elements. Command G, and let's rename it to header and transform it to a frame. This frame be set to left and right. All right, now one last thing, let's see the prototype version of those two screens so we can see the animation. So let's go to prototype and select the phone frame and go create an interaction. Next, select desktop and create an interaction. Now let's test first our mobile. Right, this is my phone, and if I click this menu, right, let's go back to our navbar and let's set this navbar layer to the top layers of my head. Let's go back, and if we click, okay, it works great. All right, my animation is working in the background. Now let's test my desktop frame. Let's go here and change my screen to none. And here we go. My button is working. Also this. Let's remove this sidebar. Okay, all right. That looks great. The animation is working in the background. All right, that was everything for our header section. Next, we're gonna create the feature section of our landing page. Thanks, and I will see you in the next part.